All right, folks, I've got another one today, and it's really grating on my nerves. I unfortunately have to see a great deal of conservative media. It's just a function of where I live. And, of course, because of where I live, outlets like Facebook and others who present news to me assume that these are the kinds of news articles that I want to read. Of course, conservative media. That's beside the point. All this talk about tuition forgiveness. Let me rephrase. Student loan forgiveness. Student loan debt forgiveness. All right. Let's make something very, very clear. There are millions of Americans who suffer under student loan debt, right? I'm in my 40s, okay? And when I was growing up, and even today, you still hear it a lot, we were, people of my generation, were told repeatedly, you have to go to college if you want to succeed in life. You have to go to college, you have to get a degree, you have to get into a good school, you have to go out and do these things. And millions of Americans who were convinced that that was the route they were required to take in order to do anything in life went out and took on student loans at 17 and 18, 19 years old to go to these colleges that had been increasing their tuition rates, in some instances exponentially, every few years. To the extent that a college 40 years ago that would have cost you $2,500 a year to attend now costs you $50,000 a year to attend. Okay? State governments and even the federal government tried to address these issues by implementing things like the Hope Scholarship. Pardon me. Pell Grants, etc. The military jumped on the bandwagon and said, if you enlist in the military, we're going to give you $40,000 for college. You'll have access to the GI Bill. You'll have access to free learning programs, free higher education programs, etc., etc., etc. Excuse me. A frog in my throat today. Coffee. Always helps. But here's the problem, right? Number one, there aren't enough employment opportunities for all the people that were coming out of colleges with degrees. That's problem one. Problem two, a lot of people from my generation and the millennial generation were fed this bucket of lies about their college having an 85 or 90 or 95% job placement. And that wasn't true. Then you have on top of that the predatory lending aspect after Sallie Mae and Freddie Mac were privatized. And so now you would go in, you would apply through your FAFSA for your student loans, and initially you might get a loan for 4% interest. And then 6 months later, that company sells that loan to another company, and now your interest rate is 6%. And then a year later, that company sells it to another company, and now your interest is 8%. And this is all perfectly legal. They're allowed to do this. Then on top of that, they hamstrung us by passing these laws. I want to say it's early 2000s. I would actually have to look. But student loan debt and medical debt are the two debts that will not come off of your credit report. Just about everything else comes off after 7 years that's negative. But student loans and medical debt do not come off your credit report. So if you default on a student loan because you went to school and you got a degree in English and you couldn't find a job anywhere that your degree in English was beneficial for, either you had to go back to school and get another degree, maybe a master's degree or a different bachelor's degree in order to get it, or you go into a field like education where just having the degree is not enough. You also have to go and get certifications. So like in Georgia, Tennessee, you have to have a 2-year certification from an accredited institution. And so it was never, you get this degree and you're done. It's, you get this degree and now you've got to go do these other things. You've got to get this, multi-$1,000 certification. Or if you're in IT, they want you to have certifications in this security system, certifications in this particular software, project management certifications, like the PMP certifications, etc. You got to go out and you got to get all these different certifications. So your education never stops and you have to keep shelling out more money. Well, meanwhile, your student loans are coming due and you're not getting jobs in the fields that your education is actually in. Right? And if you do look out and you get a job that your education is actually in, you're lucky if you barely make more in the beginning than poverty wages. You don't make enough to pay back these student loans. Now, here's one of the things that truly, and I mean truly, bugs me about this. If you are 18 years old and you walk into a bank and you say, "Hi, the house next door to my parents' house is up for sale and I would like to buy that house. Will you give me a loan for it?" The bank is going to say, "No, sorry, you're out of luck." But if you go into that bank and you say, "Hi, I'm going to college. It's going to cost $60,000 per year. I'd like a loan so that I could go to college," the bank's going to say, "Cha-ching, we'll give you that loan." That's a problem to me. You can't get a loan for $200,000 to buy a house, but you can get a loan for $240,000 for a 4-year education at 2 to 3 times the market interest rate that you would have on a mortgage. It's ridiculous, right? And you get your loan, you go to college, and you come out of college with a degree. Let's say you have a degree in history, or you have a degree in English, or you have a degree in mathematics. But you're not going to be able to do anything with that degree, right? You're going to be working as a barista in Starbucks. Or you're going to have to go out and get other certifications, or you're going to have to get additional degrees. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ludicrous. Our college system is a for-profit college system. That is what it has evolved into. It is now for-profit, period. And because of that, their rates have skyrocketed. And because of that, the rates for loans have gone up. And so now you get all these people who are saddled with this debt because this is what they were convinced to do. Every few years, there's a glut in the market of particular types of graduates. Excuse me. There was a time period where there were more doctors graduating school than there were jobs for doctors. So a lot of these doctors were having to go to very small practices or seek alternative employments in order to start paying back their hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans. And then it kind of flipped, and for a while went to lawyers. There were a glut of lawyers entering the market. And so when you have a glut of lawyers entering the market and there are fewer jobs, those jobs can pay you less money, and it's more competitive to get into those jobs. So you had a lot of lawyers who were just coming up with ways somehow of making money. And then for probably the last 10 to 15 years, it was people coming out of school with degrees in computer science. Well, there aren't enough computer science jobs, number one. And number two, you have to understand that computer science is a very broad field. Computer science covers a huge spectrum of things. Databases, website development, front-end development specifically, back-end development specifically, IT infrastructure. But what kind of IT infrastructure? Is it, wireless infrastructure? Is it wired infrastructure? Is it router management? Is it, computer maintenance? Is it software maintenance? Is it software development? If it's software development, what kind of software development? Is it a Java-based software? Is it a C# based software? Is it COBOL? It's huge spectrum in the computer science fields. And all these kids come out of school with degrees in computer science, expecting to get jobs in computer science. And in many instances, jobs that just don't exist, or jobs that they have absolutely no experience in. I'll tell you, when I was an IT contractor, right, there were quite a few times, many instances, where it was part of my contract to recruit and hire personnel to fill positions, qualified personnel to fill those positions. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that it was almost 100% of people that had degrees in computer science freshly out of college that did not get the job. Sounds like it sucks, but here's the reality of the situation. If I need, let's say, a Python developer, let's say somebody that develops in Python, Perl, Ruby, and I look at two resumes. I've got a resume of a 22-year-old guy who has been doing Python, Perl, and Ruby for the last 5 years and has a previous job where he was doing Python, Perl, and Ruby. And then I look at a resume of a kid who has a bachelor's degree in computer science and has, a year of experience in Ruby. Who am I going to hire? I'm going to hire the guy with 5 years of experience doing this, even though he doesn't have a degree. This is very common in the IT industry, and a lot of people do not understand that. A lot of people do not understand that. A lot of these kids going to school think that they get this degree and they can just walk right into the market and everything's going to be copacetic. And it's not. It's not how it works. Now, a lot of companies will have their HR departments, and I've spoken about this before, but a lot of companies will have their HR departments tack on requirements to job postings talking about or requiring bachelor's degrees, even master's degrees, etc., for entry-level jobs. And I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning for that is, other than probably getting 95+% of the applicants rejected for these jobs, and positions staying open in companies. There was a company that I worked for a while back. They had posted a job, a development position, and that job had been vacant for over a year. They had 2 developers in the position. They needed 3, and they couldn't find anyone. They couldn't find anyone to fill this position, so the 2 developers were having to do the work of 3 developers. Problem was that, not only were you having these 2 people doing the work of 3 people, but on top of that, their backlog of action items was obscene. I mean, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of items, bug fixes, new feature implementation, customer requests for specific changes, things of that nature, and they just weren't getting done because these 2 people just did not have the capacity to be able to work that list down. And the project manager that was involved in that had absolutely no development experience whatsoever. None. Not a single minute of development experience. So the project manager wasn't even able to help them prioritize these things, nor were the developers allowed to prioritize the list. They were told which items they had to work on, and they were never really getting anything done. So they tasked me, this company, with trying to help them find someone to fill that 3rd role while I helped them out to try to work down this action item list. So the first thing I did was looked at the job posting and the salary range for the job posting. The job was $40,000 a year. And here's what HR had tacked on to this. So ridiculous. All right. So they needed a C# developer and they needed a SQL developer, right? The 2 people that were already on the team, both were SQL developers and both were C# developers. Great. Sorry, motorcycle. Both were C#, both were SQL developers. They needed a 3rd C# developer who had experience in SQL but not dedicated to SQL. $40,000 a year. Here's their list of requirements. 10 years of C# and SQL development. Bachelor's degree in computer science required, master's degree preferred. Certifications in data architecture. Certification as a security analyst. You are not going to find someone who has 10 years of experience developing C# and SQL with a bachelor's degree or master's degree, plus those certifications, that's going to take that job for $40,000 a year. You're lucky if you'll find somebody for $75,000 or $80,000 a year for that job. Okay? And that's the reason why they hadn't filled that position. I made 2 phone calls. 2 phone calls. And I had 2 perfectly qualified applicants for that position. They knew C#, they knew SQL. I gave them a 2-minute test over the phone, and they were both qualified for the job. I got one of those applicants hired the next week and filled that role, because we bypassed the whole HR requirement shenanigans crap. Okay? The reason that I bring all of that up is if you have 5,000 jobs posted and you have 6,000 applicants, and those 6,000 applicants apply for those 5,000 jobs, but the automated application systems reject 3,500 of those applications outright because they don't meet this specific keyword requirement in their resume or application. You've got 1,500 people to fill these 3,000 positions, and you've got 3,500 people that can't get a job. to pay off these student loans that they took out to go to school to get. Right? So now, this is not one specific field that has this problem. This is a myriad, or there are a myriad of fields that have that same kind of problem. But we're all told we have to go to college. We're all told that we're going to have to take out student loans in order to go to college, because even scholarships these days, unless you're a football player, don't cover everything. They just don't. You got to borrow money at some point in time, right? Whether it's for housing or it's for books. And you can't even get me started on the cost of books for college courses. It's obscene. One of my books was $375. One book was $375. I actually found a copy of that book that was 2 years older in a thrift store for 50 cents. But I was not allowed to use that book in that class. It had to be the specific edition. Now, I went through and I checked page by page through that book. The only thing that was different between those two editions was the title page. Nothing else in that book was different. But I was technically not allowed to use the 50-cent copy. I was supposed to use the $300 copy. So that's obscene. It's absolutely ridiculous. The cost of college books is mind-boggling. And that's not the most expensive crap that's out there. I've talked to people who've told me that they've had to buy books that were $600 and $700 for the book. That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But those have to be paid for. And the resale value on those books is marginal at best. And the next class of people that need that book may not even be able to use that book for their course. It's ridiculous. It's obscene. It's like, what the hell? So, that's one set of problems. Then on top of that, you have people who come out of school with, let's say, $125,000 worth of student loan debt. They start repaying their loans, $1,200, $1,300 a month. They pay their loans for 11, 12 years. They've paid back $128,000. And guess what? The way interest works, they still owe more than what they owed originally, and they've paid more. So if they paid off their loan that day, they would have paid $250,000 for a $120,000 loan. The math is out there. All you have to do is Google it. It's there. The information is there. It's predatory, and it's hurting our economy. It's hurting our populace. It's hurting the emotional and mental welfare of our populace. It's hurting our workforce. And I absolutely 100% agree that student loan forgiveness is a fantastic thing that's going to help us in the future. But you know what would be even more helpful? Even more helpful? Not make students have to take out huge loans in the first place, going into massive amounts of debt in order to get a college degree they may or may not even be able to use. What in the hell is wrong here?